Good morning on this Sunday, April 21st, and welcome to the Georgia Gang. Senator Jon Ossoff grills the Postmaster General over massive mail problems in Georgia. Also, $10 million. That's the price of destruction caused by Atlanta police training facility protesters. So says Mayor Andre Dickens. And another Gwinnett County city will soon get Microtransit. Melita, Phil, Theron, and Janelle are all here. The debate and discussion begin right now.
From the Fox 5 studios, the Georgia Gang starts now.
U.S. Postal Service leaders admit a vast majority of folks living in the Atlanta area are not getting their mail on time. Senator Jon Ossoff grilled the Postmaster General about the delays.
Core job of the Postal Service is to deliver mail and packages on time, correct?
Yes, sir.
Are mail and packages being delivered on time in Georgia today?
No, sir.
Postmaster General Louis DeJoy apologized and defended the upgrades he's making. He blamed the problems on consolidating operations to its new processing and distribution center in Palmetto. DeJoy said if they don't modernize, there would be more issues across the country.
I'm optimistic about the changes. It's probably to no one's satisfaction in this room or in this town, but it's what we got. This is the plan we're going with. We're moving forward, and it is, in fact, having an impact.
The changes are part of the Postal Service's 10-year modernization plan. In Palmetto, DeJoy says they expect to be fully staffed this month, but delivery delays could continue into the summer. That's not the news Senator Jon Ossoff wanted to hear.
You've got weeks, not months, to fix this, and if you don't fix it, 36% on-time delivery, I don't think you're fit for this job.
Senator Ossoff says he's got constituents calling his office saying they're not getting their medications, bills, and checks. It's a real problem. Theron, to you first, 36% on-time delivery. I mean, that's unacceptable.
You know, we talk on this show a lot about, and Phil has done this before, when he talks about age, like no one needs an older CEO. Well, I think what Senator Ossoff really showed Georgians is that we have a guy who's leading the U.S. Postal Service, which, by the way, is one of the most unsung but most needed services that the federal government offers its people. I mean, it connects urban centers with rural areas. I mean, we all depend on our mail. And so people may criticize the senator's temperament, but that's Jon Ossoff. That's Senator Ossoff. And to me, that was the leadership that we needed, because not only when it comes to this, like you said, medical bills, people, letters to their families, getting mail when you're waiting on it. If you get it too late, you've missed a deadline. And so this is a bipartisan issue that all Georgians should be very concerned about. And lastly, I just want to applaud the senator, where this is something that he just didn't emerge on the scene at this hearing. He's been leading on this issue, and his office has been asking for results and been asking for better accountability, and more importantly, a plan going forward. I mean, 36% is totally deplorable, and we've got to fix it.
Phil, I mean, good for Senator Ossoff for getting out in front of this and trying to get some answers.
Yes, but I think he's missing the point, along with some other senators. The Postal Service has been running deficits ever since the 1970s. I remember doing an editorial in the 1980s saying that privatize the darn thing. Let's have competition. All of the private delivery services make a profit. This doesn't. The taxpayers have to bail it out every year. We need to privatize it. It's the only agency that's explicitly designated by Congress to deliver the mail. I think that we ought to, and we've seen privatization which can work. I think we ought to go that route rather than just, I don't care who's postmaster, they're going to have all these screw-ups.
Melita.
Well, this is a postmaster who was appointed by the previous president, and I thought it was telling that the Postmaster General had not read the letters Senator Ossoff had sent to him prior to going before the committee Ossoff was chairing to give testimony. That's pretty much a cardinal rule for testifying before Congress. At least read the mail from the person who's going to be asking you questions. And I think that's an indicator of what a poor job he has done and the approach he's taken to the U.S. Postal Service. And there is competition between the private entities like FedEx and UPS, but they charge more. By and large, for many packages, I've compared pricing than the U.S. Postal Service, and the U.S. Postal Service handles certain things that the private entities don't.
So, I mean, well, I'm pretty sure that Senator Jon Ossoff doesn't read every single letter that comes into his office. We've all worked. We've all been around. We know that's not happening. That being said, I agree with Phil. I think we need to privatize. I happened to wake up around 3 a.m. this morning and I listened to the hearing, and I couldn't go back to sleep, so I just listened to it. And as I was listening to it, Senator Rand Paul made some really good points too. He talked about the pension fund. He talked about how with government workers, you're pretty much guaranteed your pension, but there's no contribution into it. Whereas in private companies, when you pay into your retirement, so you're contributing to it. Another thing that came up that I thought was interesting was that they were down on employees, and a lot of their employees are union workers. So I'm a little confused about what's happening there. I think at the end of all of this, I really do believe that if we can privatize way more of the things that we have the government handling, I think we'll be in a better position.
Theron, does this give, Republicans the chance to say, let's privatize?
Well, I don't
for privatization.
I don't think that's the next step in the hearing. You got to fix what you have and with the people that are currently running it. The whole privatization process will take too long. There are people right now in this state that are depending on their mail now. Like, they need to get their mail now, and they need to make sure that when they send things out, that it's going to get there on time. So look, the privatization of government, that's a conversation that a lot of people come with. I think what the senator did was this. And again, I think his tone was necessary. I mean, that's the Senator Ossoff I know. I mean, and that's how he is. If you come to him asking him for support on the issue and you can't explain yourself, it was good. But Melita makes a really good point. This is, again, something that he's been passionate about. He sent letter, his staff has been working on it. And then also to her point, this is a guy who was put forth by the previous president, and then the search firms that were doing the searches, he wasn't even recommended. And so I think you got to look at changes that can be made at the top. And also, that's a good point that one of you all made about the staffing not being, I think you just made that point. We need to make sure that this is something that President Biden needs to make sure that we get the proper staffing in there as well.
Congress could start the process now, and I would challenge Senator Ossoff and others to do the process to have a privatization. Yes, we have to fix what's going on in Georgia and other areas.
But I'm going to ask you one question, Phil, with all due respect. Do you really think that this Congress, which has the lowest delivery rate in any Congress in history, can actually get this done? They're doing nothing.
Well, there would be an agreement on that.
I think there would be an agreement on this. Actually, a lot of Democrats have talked about privatization. It's a bloated bureaucracy, and it's going to be hard to fix. I know we got to try to do some fixes now, but also, Congress actually meddles in the Postal Service. It stipulates pricing, and it's not always good pricing at all. And the labor, and you're making a good point. They are told what to do with their labor employment.
I just want to say this really quick. There's another aspect of this that we're not talking about too, is that Senator Ossoff, in all of the grandstanding, he said that he wanted this to be fixed in 2 weeks. Well, if you think that it can be fixed in 2 weeks, then you absolutely have enough time to privatize this all. Because the gentleman, Mr. DeJoy, said that it was going to take him 60 days. I thought that was actually good. If he could turn this around in 60 days as a business owner, we all are business owners, we know that you can't move a ship that quickly. So 60 days I thought sound good, but when Ossoff says, well, I need this done in 2 weeks, I'm like, well, that's
never run a business.
Well, 3 weeks.
Right,
he's never run a business, you can tell.
Yeah.
The thing is, we talk about, he's asking for 36% on-time delivery because in Atlanta, for mail delivered within Atlanta, it's only 16% that's been delivered on time.
The people I think about are the people who don't have access to internet, and you're right, can't maybe afford
and
it.
medications
and medication. Like those are my mom, who I know depends on the mail system. I'm thinking about her, and that's why I think Senator Ossoff are thinking about those Georgians.
All right, and I'm thinking about that Lego I ordered for my son that's about 2 months late. So if anybody gets it in the mail, let me know. No surprise, but this week Governor Brian Kemp signed a massive income tax cut into law, saving individuals and business owners about $500 million. Melita?
Well, you're right. It was no surprise. And
had bipartisan support.
And it had bipartisan support. So, the surprise would have been if he hadn't signed it quickly.
Phil.
Aren't you happy that you're getting some money back? That's the people's money.
Tiny amount.
And the whole point here is to eventually get rid, this is the state income tax we're talking about, get rid of the state income tax. So this is a part of a Republican phase out.
Well, the thing that I had to remind myself is the individual income tax in this state is the main source of revenue for public health, schools, policing, courts, and dozens of other functions. And so, look, this is something that, you're right, got bipartisan support. And as a Democrat, I'm for tax cuts. And if we can put money back into people's pocketbooks and hard-working Georgians, I'm all for that.
Yeah, and I mean, I never lose sight of the fact that we all get to do this, right? We're all business owners. Thank God that we're in a position where we're not, living paycheck to paycheck. But there are a lot lot of people who are, and that little bit that Melita you're talking about goes a long way for some people. So this is why I'm a Republican, because I believe that we need to put money back in the hands of the people and out of the hands of the government.
All right. No comebacks on that one? Okay. Up next, Atlanta Mayor Andre Dickens says protesters of the Atlanta Police Training Facility have caused more than $10 million worth of damage. We'll discuss next.
Police chief to say that property damage and vandalism are not acceptable in Atlanta. That is not the peaceful protest way that Atlanta has made change happen in the past. And it's inappropriate, and so it's a good thing for the city to crack down on it.
Phil.
Well, I think that the mayor is absolutely right, and I don't like the word protesters being used by the media, because these, as the mayor said, I'm going to quote Mayor Andre Dickens, they're vandals. And yes, you're right. And the sad thing is the hard left, the radicals, the anarchists hijack these peaceful protests. And I want to hear more protests coming from those sincere people. I know there are some that oppose the facility. I'm in favor of it. I think most people are. But they ought to be speaking out like you are against this.
Well, Phil makes a really good point real quick, Lori. There are people who are destructionists, anarchists, and people who are basically tearing up the city. And what this argument does is that when you see $10 million for those who may be on the side of peaceful protest, what the mayor did, I think he shifted the sort of narrative to say, look, we're paying for this destruction. And so when these people decide to tie themselves up to construction cranes and go in and knock out windows and burn police cars, the city has to pay for that.
And trained police officers and firemen have to go get
and they have to deal
people.
with it, yeah.
And it's still moving forward, so it's not working. Well, meanwhile, Governor Kemp told Georgia's public safety commissioner that if we see any of the pro-Palestinian protesters in Georgia that block traffic, like in other parts of the country, he can lock them up. It's a Sunday morning show, family-oriented show, so we're not going to say what he really said. Janelle?
Okay, so I've been following this very closely because a lot of the young people that we work with do have some emotions around this, and so I listen to both sides of it, and I think this is where we're having some issues. It's the moral equivalency issue. It's the fact that we're telling, we want Jewish people to understand or have compassion for the children that were impacted as a retaliation from the attack that happened to Jewish people on October 7th. It's saying that the person who defends themselves or out of self-defense is somehow equivalent to someone who's a cold-blooded murderer. Hamas ran into Israel and killed people on October 7th without any type of warning. They didn't give the citizens any type of warning to get out and say, I'm going to attack. Whereas on the flip side of that, Israel alerted Hamas and said, hey, we are going to attack, but you can get your people out safely. It's the moral equivalency that people can't connect with.
What about the protesters, though, in Georgia?
Well,
Melita?
I think the governor is correct in saying there is a way to protest, and we're not going to have you protesting in an improper fashion that impedes traffic, that ties up airports, that destroys property. I also think it was interesting that the governor delivered these remarks at sort of a Republican love fest sponsored by former Senator Loeffler's gala for her Better Georgia project. So it's almost as though the governor is saying Georgia Republicans are finding a way to move forward together in a post-Trump way for the Republican Party.
Well, and destruction and vandalism and all of that is not the Georgia way. So, all right, Georgia is joining 6 other Republican-led states in suing to block the Biden administration over its new student loan repayment plan. Attorney General Chris Carr says Georgia taxpayers have made it clear they know it's wrong to be forced to pay off other people's student loans. Phil.
Well, this is an outrageous shifting of money. It's going to cost billions, and it's going to create more inflation, which Biden just loves to throw gas on the inflationary fire. And so, and he actually shamelessly tries to undermine the rule of law. He's laughing openly about, I've got to beat the Supreme Court before they rule this unconstitutional. Well, the Supreme Court already did his first scheme, ruled as unconstitutional. I think it's a disgrace when this is happening, and it's got got to stop, and I hope the Supreme Court stops it quick.
Theron, your thoughts on Georgia joining this lawsuit?
Look, I think this debt forgiveness program that the president is administering is targeting hardworking Georgians and hardworking Americans. I mean, how many people have actually been able to afford, they default their loans, sometimes they actually put them off to basically pay back. So I think it's a popular program that's actually hitting those hardworking people. But then I think, I didn't hear this outcry from Republicans when we all, and I mean all, benefited from the PPP loans. I mean, again, the data shows that small businesses were saved, right? Making sure that people could survive. Now, I think what the president is doing, and we're not talking more about it, is that why can't people's student loan debt be forgiven and make sure that they can use that money to take care of their families? I mean, that's the argument. I think that's where the president is going to get reelected.
Well, you want to do it on credit cards? Where does it stop?
I think we can find a way to pay for it.
I think there's a way to handle this that can pretty much help everybody, because I do see where you're coming from there, and this is the way I feel. I don't think we should cancel student loan debts because I don't think that other people should be responsible for the debts of others. However, as Republicans, I think we can take this conversation by creating something that helps to address the crazy interest rates that are associated with these student loan debts. We have people who signed for loans at 19 years old and they're 70 still paying them off. That's ridiculous. So I do think there's something we can do to fix this that doesn't require us to have someone else pay for other people's debt.
Alita. Oh,
Well,
sorry.
Janelle makes a great point about the high interest rates that some people are paying on this student loan debt and how long they continue to pay, and they've gone way past paying well over what they borrowed, and they still owe a large amount. In fact, Georgia has 1.7 million people who owe student loan debt. It's the 8th highest total in the nation, and Georgians owe on average $41,000. And that's the 3rd highest figure in the nation.
One of my proudest moments just happened a few years ago is when I could call my mother on the phone and say, "Mom, we finally paid off that Parent Plus loan that I had to take out at Park Lane University." And this just happened a few years ago. I mean, and so it took 20 plus years for me finally to say, why am I paying on this loan that she took out for me to keep me in school that had this crazy interest rate? And I know there's a lot more people out there like me.
But see, there's the flip side. You were so proud to call your mom to say, I paid it off.
Right.
I paid it off,
You did it
right?
the right way. You did it the right way.
No, but here's the point. I missed it. It took me 2 decades to get to a point where I can make a little bit of money. There are a lot of people out there that are not like me, that haven't been able to get to a successful point where they can make that decision.
Do you know that this...
And there's 1.4 million of them.
This loan scheme will actually jack up interest rates. Do you know that?
I think we can get. I mean, the president. I'm telling y'all, it is having an effect on people. People are talking about it, and the Republicans. But listen to Janelle. This is a very, very important issue that I think hardworking Americans are unlike the president.
It's definitely a good issue. All right, coming up, Microtransit is coming to the city of Norcross in Gwinnett County. We'll discuss after the break.
Join the discussion on the Georgia Gang Facebook page and watch past episodes on the Georgia Gang YouTube channel.
Norcross in Gwinnett County is just the latest city to get a new microtransit system. Gwinnett County commissioners signed off on the idea this week. Now, the contract provides 4 small buses that carry 9 passengers each. Theron, Gwinnett said no to a MARTA 1-cent sales tax 3 times. Now they're doing it on their own.
Well, stay tuned on the MARTA. I'm sorry, can't call it MARTA. The transit referendum, which is probably going to be called in June. So I know we're getting ahead of ourselves, but the Gwinnett residents will have the opportunity to vote on that again. This is a great step in the right direction. I mean, if you look at ways that micromobility, and then we had that robust conversation about the Beltline. I told our good friend Kathy Willard that I think micromobility was something that not only we need on the Beltline, but we need it all around the region. And so the fact that it's getting the publicity that it needs, and we can pay for it, it's a good thing. And shouts out to Gwinnett for again being a big leader in this area.
Phil.
Well, I agree. I want to put a shout out though to the Gateway 85 CID too, because it's a 3-way split between the city, the county, and the CID, which has been doing great things. That's a public-private partnership for people who aren't familiar with the CID. And I'm also in favor, Lori, you brought it up rightly so during that MARTA debate. Microtransit is the wave of the future.
Melita?
Well, this is an area where there's so many lanes to so many of those roads that something needed to happen to allow people to get from one place to another safely.
All right. Well, thousands of Black college students are in Tybee Island this weekend for the annual spring break bash known as Orange Crush. However, they're being greeted by dozens of extra police officers and barricades closing off neighborhood streets. Now, the mayor says he hopes this will drive away the bash for good. Critics say local officials are overreacting and appear to be singling out African-American visitors. All right, Janelle and Theron, y'all have been cracking up over this.
Yes, because, okay, so I know about the Orange Crush, and I have been in the area. I will say, Theron, I will say this. I have a friend who has a home there, and she said she came home one day, just walking back home, and there was a girl who was twerking on her car. And I just asked myself, what is going on? Now, I'm not against having fun, right? I mean, I went to a HBCU, North Carolina A&T Aggie Pride, and we had a great time. That being said, we were taught to have respect for ourselves, but also, and most importantly, have respect for others. So have fun, but do not destroy people's property, twerk on cars, or be belligerently drunk and angry. Just, have fun.
Theron.
So I also have, what do you say, been a part or been in the area? No,
You've been in the area?
No. Shout out to Orange Crush in the mid-'90s, and for those of us who were in college around that time, it was when we would go down to Statesboro and to Savannah and that area, and the students. It was exactly what Janelle explained. I mean, it was a student, and the locals and people would come, and it would be peaceful. Now, what it is evolved into, and shout out to Mayor Van Johnson, Savannah,
yes,
who said, no, we need to keep this going. I know Melita is going to talk about this too, about his role in it. And so I think now, look, it's excessive. I do sympathize with the homeowners, but I do think that Orange Crush has always been something that people like to go to, and it brings a lot of economic empowerment to those local businesses that are there as well. The hotels, the Airbnb, all these people go there. So I may actually, go back down.
Freaknik started out. I watched the Freaknik documentary, and it started out as a spring break fun festival, and then it got out of hand,
and Orange Crush
it went
has
away.
always been something that I think will continue to be safe, and I think with the extra police, I think people will conduct themselves appropriately.
All right,
well,
Phil.
what we're forgetting to tell people that's not familiar with this. By the way, I've never been to the Orange Crush.
You could go with Theron.
I know it.
They'll be your chaperones.
100,000 people were on Tybee Island last year. Now that's too much. That's crazy. And so you've got to restrict it. And if you had a bigger area, you might have a Woodstock type festival, but it's not working with 100,000 people there. I think the restrictions are necessary.
Melita.
Well, what's interesting about this is that Savannah Mayor Van Johnson was one of the founders of the first Orange Crush in 1988. And so he admits, that it's gotten a little bit out of hand, but he also says he thinks there's too much police presence on the beach. So it's very interesting to see him in that role of starting something that's now turned into a political problem.
A mess.
So, being the youngest one here, I have to ask, did you go to Freaknik?
Well, I mean, I was there covering it because I was a chick too.
You were in the area.
Yeah, I was in the area.
In the area. Okay, were you in the area, Phil?
I'm gonna go back and watch
Melita,
the tape.
did you go to Freaknik?
I was in the area, but I didn't go. I was trying to get through the traffic and got
We
caught.
should have had that. Babe, I was in the area.
I was in the area.
Let me just tell you, it was fun people watching.
And shout out to the
I didn't get to
Freaknik
experience
people who
Freaknik.
came together. That Kathleen Bertrand, who's a dear friend, was in there, and Jermaine Dupree, and all the folks. And look, I remember, I'm disappointed. When I got to Clark Atlanta University in 1996, Freaknik was kind of on his way out because I had heard those stories that my brother would come back and tell me, but it was a good documentary.
And you never felt unsafe. You never felt unsafe.
But it got out of control.
For those who are listening and don't understand what Freaknik was, I highly recommend the book A Man in Full, which opens with a Tom Wolfe described Freaknik scene.
All right, and the documentary.
Documentary
All
did a
right,
good job.
Yeah.
Really
winners
good.
and losers next. Stay tuned.
Time now for the week's winners and losers.
All right, Melita, we'll start with you.
Well, my first winner is everybody involved with airport operations, because Hartsfield-Jackson Airport has maintained its title as the world's busiest airport by serving 104 million passengers in 2023, 18 million more passengers than the next busiest. And then, as we tape on Friday, the Reverend Senator Raphael Warnock was set for a private audience with Pope Francis on Saturday at the Vatican.
Nice.
Quite a meeting.
Yes, I'll say.
Well, I'm going to make that winner the income tax cut That's great for everybody, even Melita. You should like that and be happy. And you know, I've got a loser. It's, again, the open borders policy of the Biden administration, which has created chaos and fentanyl and human trafficking, drug trafficking, et cetera, et cetera. There was in the U.S. Senate, there was an impeachment of Alejandro Mayorkas, the Homeland Security Secretary, who really is totally incompetent. And all Democrat senators, Warnock and Ossoff included, would not vote to impeach this guy. You talk about somebody incompetent. He's worse than the Postmaster General. We got to get rid of him.
Aaron.
All right, definitely echo what Melita said about the airport. And speaking of the airport, I go through there a lot last week, but I want to give a shout out to two people, the Atlanta Airport TSA officer, Ricardo Richardson. We had some robust conversation about TSA, but good guy. He watches the show. And also Beverly Willingham, who's a Delta Redco who took care of me at the gate. And then lastly, I want to give my sincere condolences to Rico Wade, who was one of the co-founders of the Dungeon family. I'm a huge Goody Mob Outkast fan, and he passed away this week.
Yeah, I share those condolences. I could not leave the show without saying that because Kelvin was a fan of Goody Mob. And then shout out to B.T. Parker, who's running for Superior Court Judge. And then I have a couple of other friends that I'm going to announce the next time I'm on because due to time I have to wrap it up, but thank you.
All right, we're running out of time. Have a great week, everyone. We'll see you next time.